Okay, this weekend I got to watch a movie that I have been looking forward to since I knew that it was written and that it was in production. I am a huge Shia LaBeouf fan, and I have been waiting for this movie for quite some time now, and I will 100% go ahead and say that I am definitely biased going into this movie. I'm talking about Honey Boy, if you've heard of it. It's in super limited release right now. Even in New York, usually it's pretty easy to find indie films when they come out, or any sort of film that has a limited release in New York, because we have amazing theaters that have a good mix of both for the most part. But this one was only available at the Angelica and one other AMC theater, which was by Lincoln Square, Lincoln Center, sorry. And I don't know why that is, if there's going to be a wider release, and this is just opening weekend limited release, but I think around the states, at least, I know it's in super limited states. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say that if it's near you, try and go watch it. Like I said, I'm a big Shia LaBeouf fan, but I think his life is rather interesting in general, and I think what he has been able to do with this movie is beautiful. I tried to go into it not having any sort of bias and not having any sort of expectation as far as how good it was going to be, because it has a great rating on Rotten Tomatoes. I will say, again, that's probably one of the only sources that I check before I see a movie, because I like to go into it trying to form my own opinion. But this one, I knew it had a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I wanted to see what the hype was about, and again, try and go into it with an open mind and not be completely just ready to buy whatever it is that he was going to put on there. Because I could do that, like, I love him so much that, like, I would be willing to. I saw Peanut Butter Falcon this summer, which was a film he just starred in. He didn't write or anything for it, but and I love that film. But I will say a huge part of that is because I just love him and I love to see him act. It's like if you have a favorite musician, maybe he's not playing the song that you love, but you're still gonna love what you're seeing because it's your favorite musician. He's one of my favorite actors, so I'm always gonna love what he's doing. Maybe not always. I will say I have never watched a Transformers movie all the way through, but I think even he would admit that those movies are trash. So, yeah. But yes, Honey Boy, it's semi autobiographical is how he described it. But all the experiences in the film are his experiences, and it's super interesting to see from his perspective the way that it ended up being on the actual film. Is that, spoiler alert, the way that his life is seen through is that he kind of goes through the films throughout the years that he's done, and it's beautifully done. The story, it flows so well, and any part that could feel choppy, like they could have cuts that are going back and forth and all of that, none of it ever feels like you're lost. It's just like so well done. Of course, that didn't all have to do with him, but he wrote the film. He didn't direct or anything like that, but he wrote the film, and you can tell how much that changes things. Like, he wrote this film in rehab, and it was just dialogue, and you can tell that, like, you know the direction, the transitions, things like that, obviously that's going to come from an amazing director, and she is an amazing director. But the writing feels so real, because it's from his life and his relationship with his dad. And for those of you who don't know, the movie is really about his kind of journey into sobriety, and his relationship with his dad, and trying to make amends with what his childhood really was, which, was not a normal childhood at all. He was a child actor on Even Stevens. And I think that's another reason why it was so close to my heart, was that that was the show that I watched growing up, that I remember I wouldn't miss a single episode. Like the Halloween episode came out and I thought it was amazing, and I thought he was just so funny. Like so funny. There were two people I thought were like the funniest human beings when I was younger, and he was one of them. And like every episode of Even Stevens, I remember thinking like I always wanted to be like him. Like he was just cool and funny, and like I think a lot of I obviously I did love Lizzie McGuire and all those shows as well, but I remember always thinking like Louis Stevens, he's the best. And so anyway, to get to see kind of how all of that affected him, and then later on in his career, how things played out for him in his personal life, because that's not something he really opens up about publicly. But he had a DUI and he had things that were in the public eye that never fully got explained. Was super interesting to me to see his perspective and see where that came from. And outside of the subject matter, outside of the fact that it's about his life and that's interesting to me, maybe it's not as interesting to someone who's not a fan of his. Like if you were telling me to go watch a movie about some football player that I know nothing about, that I might not find that super interesting. But outside of that, if you take that away and you go into it and see it just as an indie, it is extremely just, I mentioned to my friend, it was very much felt like the Florida Project in a way, because you're seeing his life play out, and it's kind of like, is there a resolution? Is he happy now? The only assurance that you get of that is that he tells his dad in the film that he's going to make a movie about his life. And again, spoiler alert, there's a scene at the end that like broke my heart, where it flashes back to him as a child, and he is looking straight ahead, and he gives this like tiny smile, where you kind of, it's kind of, I think it was to reassure the audience like he's gonna be okay, like he'll be okay, even though all of these things are ahead for him in his life. And I think that was the reassurance that I was looking for. But it doesn't give you a conclusion. It's not one of those, Hollywood films where it's like, and then his dad and him hugged it out and it was all great. Like, you don't really know what happened to their relationship, and that's okay. But I love that it delves into the complexity of also being a parent. I mean, I don't know what that feels like in the least, but just showing how he says in the film, his dad says in the film, everyone knows he's a crap father. And him as a kid says to him, you're not, you're a father. And it's so interesting to see that from kind of both perspectives, and you definitely have empathy for his dad, and you're seeing all the mistakes he's making, and none of it is sugar coated. None of it is like, yeah, but he did this because sacrifice and this and this. Like, he was a troubled man, and there was no denying that, and there was no putting any sort of filter on that. But at the same time, it doesn't make it seem like he was the victim. Like, it doesn't make it seem like he couldn't make his own choices, because he could, and he was making his own money at that time. So he very well could have been making certain decisions, and taking control of that situation, and maybe he couldn't because of the personal ties to his father. It's just beautifully written, beautifully shot. There were just shots in there that were like breathtaking, everything about it is wonderful. And there were little comedic moments where you get his humor, and you're like, you can understand how he was, how he got his start as a comedian, sort of. I know, but and you have those tiny moments throughout the film that you chuckle, and you're like, should I be laughing at this? Like, here's this little boy getting high with his dad, and maybe not the best thing when he's 12, but it's so endearing. And not the fact that they're smoking, but the film is so endearing and so willing to show you every character's hardships. There isn't one character that you're like, oh, you know what, they deserve this, they deserve that. this is why this person is acting this way, and the entire film is just trying to figure out what it is that is going to bring both of them peace to move forward, which I just loved. I mean, there's a few scenes where he's in rehab and he's trying to work out his anger, and it's just interesting to see the fact that there's no formula, and he delves into that, and everything that gets talked about and explored in the film is so important, and I think such a beautiful thing to be showing in cinemas and out there for people to be able to relate to. And I was sitting next to no one because I went by myself, but there were like these two guys who were sitting. It was like me, two seats, a guy, an empty seat, and another guy, but they were friends. So I was crying. I'm a crier, especially when it comes to films like this. But anytime I think something is like beautiful and it's beautifully expressed, because I think sometimes you can have a memoir, and I think that's kind of what happened with Beautiful Boy, where the book was so beautiful and amazing and it didn't quite translate into film. But sometimes when you do get that privilege of getting that out there and having it be equally as heartbreaking and beautiful on film, you've done an amazing job. And so anyway, so I was crying mostly because of that, also because of the subject matter and all that stuff. But anyway, there was one point where I turned and the guy next to me was trying so hard not to cry, and his buddy next to him was kind of like looking over at him and like laughing like at him. But I'm telling you, there were people in the theater who were, maybe you wouldn't think would get emotional, and they were, because it was so I guess honest is the best way I can describe it. Is such an honest portrayal of things that can happen when there's a beautiful line in it where his dad says, he comes from a long line of people who were in pain and didn't know how to handle it. And to an extent, aren't we all, So there's a little bit of, I guess, relatability for everyone, and anyone can take something away from the film. So I definitely say go check it out if it's near you. If it's not near you, within reason, go drive to wherever it is, because it's so worth it. Like, I would say it's up there with, I would say my favorite film of the year. Is it the best film of the year? Probably not. I would probably give that title to Joker. But for me, it's my favorite because I'm a fan of his. So, and yeah, that's biased, but if it's my opinion, I'm gonna go ahead and say that's my favorite film of the year. Calling it now. Although there are quite a few good movies coming out, but I can't see myself enjoying those. Are they going to be great, amazing films? Like It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, Ford versus Ferrari. I have no doubt. Christian Bale does not pick projects that are not good. But they're probably not going to be my favorite because Shia kind of owns my heart. So, but besides that, he also kills it in this. Like, his performance is amazing. There's so many other people in the film though that are every person was like incredible. Even the supporting characters that had like 2 lines, everyone was incredibly cast, and 10 out of 10 for me. If you're not a Shia fan, I'd say maybe 8 out of 10. But check it out, okay? You won't be disappointed.